I think escalation would look like Iran letting Hezbollah, Hamas off the leash, and then Israel going after them in a more deliberate way, and then targeting Iran for their very clear direction and support of those proxies. If Israel strikes Iran, then you've got the gate open for a direct, deliberate war between all parties.
Coming up, Edward Clancy from Aid to the Church in Need is going to be our guest. But there are lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. And we are looking at a potential escalation. And a lot of people are asking the question today, are we looking at World War III? Retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley joins us to talk about it. Colonel Dooley, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Looks like the party is getting started here. China is sending a fleet to the Middle East, or has sent one, the 44th Task Force, if I'm not mistaken. American troops have been put on deploy status or prepared to deploy status. I mean, what are we looking at here? Could we be seeing the potential third war escalation?
Well, I think from our decision perspective, it's what I would do. If I were the Secretary of Defense, I would recommend that we move assets into the region to communicate very clearly to those who really only seem to understand power what we're willing to do to protect our interests in the region and to protect our ally, Israel. It's much harder to position forces after the cat's out of the bag than to pre-position and then communicate to your threat that, hey, look, if you escalate, this is what's going to happen. So we've sent a couple of carriers into the region. We typically have a carrier strike group in that area already, but now that we have two, we've also sent a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, so we have some ground combat power as well. There's also Air Force aircraft have been moved into the region, and as you mentioned, the high altitude theater air defense system, the THAAD missiles.
Vladimir Putin gets on television in front of a news conference and basically says, hey, on behalf of the Russian Air Force, I'm just passing it along, letting you know that we're carrying hypersonic missiles that can reach your fleet. How do you read what Vladimir Putin had to say?
Do I believe that Putin will escalate? I think he's more tactical and a little bit more cagey in that area. I think he's trying to show some power, maybe for a domestic audience. I don't think he's stupid enough to launch hypersonic missiles at our fleet because of what it would mean and what it would cost him in his Ukraine campaign. Essentially, it would open up the door for a deliberate NATO strike at his forces directly.
What about Iran? We've been hearing of attacks on American outposts in Syria and in Iraq. Do you think Iran will be more interested in ramping things up? I mean, these were drone attacks, were they not?
Yeah, drone, and you can make the argument that some missiles were also launched from the Houthis in Yemen. What the ultimate targets of those missiles were remains up for debate. We believe that they might have been coming at our ships. But they might have been headed to Israel. They might have been headed to American bases. In the end, Iran in that region wages war by proxy. So Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. So that they're trying to reinforcement and giving of weapons to these proxies, aiming to keep pressure to shape the region in ways that they want. So
let me ask you a hypothetical. What would need to happen in order to see an escalation that would lead to a potential World War III?
That is the $60 million question, isn't it? Or the $60 billion question. I think what we're afraid of is the proxies that I mentioned, Hezbollah, Hamas, those who are supported by Iran. I think escalation would look like Iran letting them off the leash, and then Israel going after them in a more deliberate way, and then targeting Iran for their very clear direction and support of those proxies. If Israel strikes Iran, then you've got the gate open for any number of different possibilities. My concern would be an escalation where Iran goes after U.S. assets and Israel directly. Then you've got a direct, deliberate war between all parties. And we would want to do our best to keep Russia out of it, to keep China out of it, and they each would make their own determination about whether or not they wanted to get involved.
With Chinese and American naval assets so close together in this tense conflict, if something were to happen there, do you think that might also trigger an issue in Taiwan?
Potentially. If you've got the six or so Chinese vessels in the region tangled through a misunderstanding or miscalculation with the U.S. Navy, they'll be on the bottom in less than 30 minutes. Does that ultimately lead to a conflict near Taiwan? I think that the Chinese would respond. And then again, you've got another escalation. It's got absolutely nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East, but two parties who are at each other's throats in another region of the world. And that, by definition, is a world war.
Do you think that Israel will ultimately invade? I think a lot of people thought they were going to do it already by now, but they seem to be delaying this. Do you think that they will ultimately invade with ground forces full out, or will they just continue a bombing campaign?
In order to be successful in attacking a built-up urban area, you have to have a ratio of 6 to 1, meaning 6 of yours to every 1 of the enemy that you're going after. And you want to set the conditions by isolating, cutting off from supply, going after command and control assets, ensuring that you understand where the threat weapons happen to be. Those are all things that have to be set in place before you send your soldiers in. I believe the IDF has enough assets in place now to do what they need to do. They were able to do that in the first 5 days. But whether or not the conditions are set is up to them. Part of this is intelligence. You want to know, what does the enemy have left? If you have over 300 linear miles of tunnels underneath Gaza and the Gaza Strip, you want to have a pretty good sense of where those tunnels are and some sort of confirmation, maybe an 80% solution about where their weapons are kept. And if you're trying to preserve as many of the hostages that they took on this side of being alive and of possible rescue, then you're going to want to be a little bit more deliberate. Ask question about whether or not they can go in or should go in. That's up to them. I don't always understand or approve of Israeli methods, but I don't live as they do. I don't live with the wolf at the door. And I understand where we are now is in part because of a horrific attack that went deliberately for civilians. And when you do that, then you have to understand that that goes into their calculus about what they do next to you.
Let me ask you this question. What do you put the percentage on this whole thing escalating into a World War III? Do you think this is just going to be staging prudential judgment and it'll all just sort of, calm down in the end? Or do you think we will see something of a much more serious conflict?
I think there's probably an 80% chance that this winds down, but there's a 20% chance that it escalates.
80% chance it winds down. I like that. I want that odd. Let's pray for that. Let's pray not for the 20% that escalates. The attack on Christians in Gaza, I really feel like they're just so caught in the middle between Hamas and Israel in all of this. And I've asked Edward Clancy from Aid to the Church in Need to be our guest today to catch us up on the story. The reporting that comes out on these things when they first come out, it feels like grave manipulation. I'm going to be honest with you. It's really hard to know who to trust over there, because there's a lot of effort to exaggerate these reports from Hamas's side. They want to use that to their advantage. But at the end of the day, a building owned by the Orthodox was bombed, and people died, to include Christians. Tell us about it.
Yeah, there's a Christian enclave, if you will. There's two structures or two groups of structures. The Greek Orthodox has one group, and the Latin or Roman Catholic has another part. The Church of the Holy Family, the church that we're directly contact with, they are probably about 200 meters from where the Greek Orthodox facilities are. And so last week, there was a series of bombings in the area, and it seems as though the attacks are happening above where the Israelis believe there are tunnels. Sister Nabila has told us that the school, that is run by the Latin Patriarchate and the Holy Rosary Sisters, was one of the structures that was hit because they have tunnels underneath the school property. So it's most likely the same thing happened here, that the Greek Orthodox property is built over these tunnels or likely tunnels. And when the bombing happened, as of Friday, we knew of 16 killed. Today, we've heard that it's now 18, and there were dozens more injured. So what has happened now is the church, which has been housing about 500 people, now has over 700, including 50 or so of the injured from the bombing.
So Hamas has a very extensive tunnel network under the entire Gaza Strip, which is making it a lot more complicated, which is also why they felt they needed a ground invasion in order to be able to get in there and root things out, in order to maybe limit collateral damage. Hamas is happy to put their people, their equipment, their rockets in the midst of civilians, underneath churches, hospitals, or wherever else, because they want to use those opportunities as human shields. So grave manipulation. Israel seemed okay to be bombing a building that didn't include Hamas terrorists in, but maybe Hamas terrorists were underneath it. That's absolutely bizarre to me. It seems like neither side has much care or concern for these people.
No, and unfortunately, as is often the case, the Christians are really in the middle of it. Before this all started, the estimation was that there were about 1,300 Christians. It's almost certain that every Christian that is in Gaza is in this very small area. So if for no other reason, it would be a good reason not to attack the area, because, with one improperly dropped or aimed missile, or even maybe properly, the whole Christian population of Gaza could disappear. That's how concentrated it is. So just on that basis alone, they say anywhere from 150 to 300 kilometers of tunnels. I can't imagine that the cluster of tunnels under this area are so vital and so important that you would risk literally destroying all of the Christians in Gaza just to get them. I mean, I don't know the military significance of the location, but it is something that is troubling.
Do you think it's possible they didn't know that civilians were in this building at the time?
I think, again, speculation, that this is just a matter of military priority. I can't see it being anything else. I mean, it's not impossible, even with these laser-guided munitions, that something happens in error. There's always also human error, as far as, it still comes down to a person saying, this is the target. This is where we're going to aim the laser, and that's where it's going to hit. And, that mistake could happen as well. But I think they've made it very clear that they're going to attack based on the military importance, based upon the likelihood of success it gives them by causing destruction. So I have not heard anybody say that this was misaimed. Maybe it was, or it's mistargeted, or something like that. So my estimation of this is that they hit what they meant to hit.
How do Palestinian Christians feel? If we were able to talk to them right here, right now, what would they say about that? I mean, they must feel like they're in the middle, but at the same time, they probably feel some animosity towards Israel.
They definitely do. This is definitely is not of their making. So the issue now with the Israelis is that they are the ones that are the aggressors in this situation, and you do have vulnerable people being hurt or killed. So just that alone it makes it difficult for the Palestinian Christians to say, oh, Israel is our friends. The other thing that they have is the fact that there are non-Christian, Muslim Palestinians who are friends and neighbors who are also likewise being targeted or hurt. So all of that just means, like your neighbor's house gets blown up, you go to offer help. But, if your neighbor's being attacked, you automatically say, I'm going to help them against their attackers. So that's part of it. And then also there is the sense of Israel is the enemy of the Palestinians in the community.
And yet, I can't imagine that their militant Muslim neighbors especially are all that friendly with them. How do they get along with their, sort of more of the Hamas types in Gaza?
Well, Christians in most of these places have a certain ability to exist, but at the same time to make a good difference. Christ used the analogy of leavening, of yeast. And oftentimes that's what the Christian communities are, especially in places like this. though small in number, they have great impact. Obviously, the example of the Holy Rosary Sisters in this school, while a majority of the children going to that school are Christian, there are also a good number who are Muslim. So there is an opportunity for better education, and the Gaza government and the Gaza school system is not top of the line, whereas the Holy Rosary Sisters in the Middle East are well known for their very thorough education. The children learn in multiple languages. They taught French, they taught oftentimes English and Arabic. So they would come out of that school with a very good grounding and sort of international ability to communicate. And that's of great help to the community. So those are the things that the Christian presence really means in those areas. Because when things like this happen, where do the people go? They go to the churches, they go to the schools. This is where they seek their comfort, but also this is where they keep their communities alive. The church for us here in the West is oftentimes just a building or a side act, if you will. For them, it is the heart of their community, is the heart of who they are. I often use the description of the Coptic Christians who will tattoo a cross on their wrist and permanently mark on their bodies that they are Christians. That is something they think, I am going to let everybody know, even if it means my death and suffering, that I'm a Christian.
Wow.
And so that's similar to what you see amongst the Palestinian Christians. They never run from their faith. They live it, they make it a part of their lives, and they make it a core of who they are.
But let's talk about Cardinal Principali. He graciously offered himself as an exchange for the kidnapped victims that Hamas took on October the 7th. He seems to be I can't imagine the pressure he's feeling right now to be in a situation where he can't do all that much. He can't go in, he can't bring relief supplies, he can't get his people out. I mean, what can he do in this circumstance?
Yeah, no, it was an incredibly brave and truly Christian gesture, not even gesture, but act to offer himself. I think the day that you spoke about it, you talked about it, this is true Christian manhood. It certainly is. I mean, he's literally willing to put him in their place. So it is a wonderful sign of what the church means and what the church can do, even in these difficult times. At the same time, he's a leader, he's a diplomat, he's a person who's in the middle of it. He's going to be involved as agencies like Aid to the Church in Need are in trying to get aid into these people, also trying to get those people out who can get out. Right now, the only way to get out of Gaza for these people is down south to the Rafah gate, which is in the southern part of Gaza, northern part of Egypt. And that's where the few trucks today, I think somewhere between half a dozen or so trucks have made it in with some relief. But obviously, with 2 million people, a few trucks is very minimal at best. And the question is always, how do we get them to the people who most need it and are the most vulnerable? So Sister Nabila had said, as of Monday of last week, they had nothing, and now we're a week later. They're existing on whatever groundwater they can use for washing. They have to reserve any bottled water they have to maintain hydration, and in the case of the wounded who came in to clean wounds. That's the situation for them, and it's dreadful.
Is there any reports of those relief supplies being taken over by Hamas and then obviously not getting to the people who need them most?
We have no word yet as far as what's happening. It's unfortunately very likely that something like that could happen. Hamas has been known to use resources for political control and power, and obviously some of them there's going to be needs for their soldiers, and I would imagine other people in leadership might be in need, and there's a tendency for those people to be helped first before the very poor and the very vulnerable. It is a good know to hear that the hostages who were released were treated well. And even in the images of the video of the children who were held hostage, the babies, they all seem to look well. But really, what needs to happen is there has to be a stop to the violence for these people to find safe haven because they're trapped, and those children really should be back with their parents.
I'm still bothered by the fact that Egypt, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Qatar, none of these countries have opened their borders, sent ships to the ports of Gaza to take refugees. None of them, Egypt continues to say we will not take any refugees whatsoever. Yet the West is being pressured heavily to take refugees out of Palestine. Why do you think that is? Why won't these governments that support Hamas not take in the refugees? It seems like that would be the best option for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt is the obvious first answer. I mean, they literally are within walking distance. Rafah is a split community. There's a border between it, and one side is Egyptian, and the other side is in Gaza. So just to give you an example of the relationship between Gaza and Egypt, in 2018, the Egyptians decided to level most of the major building structures in Rafah and increase the security and roads for the purposes of security at their border with Gaza.
Wow.
So that, 5 years ago shows you the relationship that they have with Gaza, with Hamas. The fact that they are not on friendly terms and there's not a sense of trust there. And I agree, there are other countries, especially Iran, who seems to be, the financial backers of Hamas in this situation. They very easily could be helping in some way, whether it is bringing in aid or allowing for refugees. We have, those incredible hospital ships. Why not something like that? Why not bring something there that could be used to take care of the sick, the elderly, and something like that? Just, it would be very obvious. And I dare say that Israel wouldn't dare, target one of those kind of ships, that it would easily be something that could be used by the people. And obviously food and resources could be brought in.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.